Hey everyone, welcome to Salt City Hoops once again. My name is Mark Pereira, sitting to you here, recording on a Wednesday night. I have not watched the Jazz-Wolves game. I do know the score because it is mid-March for a tanking team, and I now let things get spoiled for me. So I will find out what happened at another time. I will watch a game, scout, see if Cody Williams puts up another 4,000 points. And when we get to mid-March, and especially as a fan of an NBA team that is not playing well into April and May, March Madness becomes a little bit more exciting when you have a high draft pick that could be very relevant towards the future of the Jazz, assuming that the Jazz do not lose their draft pick to Oklahoma City. But the Jazz look in good shape to acquire that pick, retain that pick, I should say, and going into this March Madness, unlike last year, where the Jazz actually had a limited amount of teams to care about in March Madness because Rutgers wasn't in it and Duke had two of the top 5 players. There's so many options to pay attention to this weekend, and I'm not a college basketball guy. With every child I add to my family, I drop a sport that I can watch day to day. So I'm a total casual going into it, and I would like to scout all the players once we know the Jazz pick and everything. But for now, I need some help talking about it. And I called up a buddy. I called up Justin Sweeney, who is well known by myself, but among many of you as a great Jazz fan on social media, hailing from Portland, but has had many stops in the United States across his career. The most preeminent fan and supporter of Filipino athletic culture.
Not incorrect.
That you'll see. Justin, we'll find you on social media at various places. I'm just thrilled to have you in here to talk a little college basketball because you've been everywhere, man.
Well, I'm absolutely flattered at that intro. I'll have a lot to live up to retroactively. I hope everything you said is just true. But it's the most wonderful time of the year. There'll be one shining moment. Hearts will be broken and pep band and cheer. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And it starts in about a little under, if my math is correct, I think 13 hours, give or take, and it'll probably be underway by the time our little chat hits the interwebs.
Yeah, look, Mountain Time, Pacific Time Zone watching for...
Close enough.
It's perfect for March Madness. Waiting until noon, no way. 10 a.m., right in the middle of the workday. This is perfect. I'm thrilled about this. I have a lot of disparate rooting interests in this year's tournament as far as the teams are concerned. Obviously, everyone knows my deep affinity for the University at Buffalo. Now, the Mid-American Conference was not kind to the University at Buffalo this year, but it was kind to fans of the Mid-American Conference because Miami's undefeated season actually led to what I think is the better Mid-American Conference team also getting in, with Akron being the champion and Miami getting in. Now, as a Buffalo fan, Akron is our biggest rival. I am not exactly an Akron fan.
LeBron will be sorry to hear that.
Yeah, right? And but I just can't help myself cheering for Akron. However, and then it leads into other problems because my beautiful wife went to the University of Alabama, and their coach Nate Oates got his mark coaching for the University of Buffalo. So as much as Nate Oates has always kind of unsavourily in the news, saying stupid things every once in a while, I like Alabama basketball no matter how many pounds of marijuana are found in the apartments of their players. So
let's just quickly gloss over all the activities that happened in the 2022-23 season outside of the court.
Yeah, everyone looking at Miles Bridges is not exactly the nicest person in the world, but his teammate Brandon Miller wasn't exactly in good graces either around that Alabama team. But look, with separating the art from the artist with college basketball, at least, I can't really get there with Miles Bridges.
Hey, did you hear Rick Pitino's back in the bracket?
Yeah, right. He's back in a big way. And Akron and Alabama might play each other, and I am also a fancy pants attorney who went to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and so I do have a little bit of affinity for my Penn Quakers, although their best player is questionable to even play, so they might get blown up by about 60 points. So I got some disparate rooting interests. Oh, last one, I promise. South Florida Bulls are coached by Ryan Hodgson, who is Nate Oates' lead assistant at Buffalo. So he goes from the Buffalo Bulls to the South Florida Bulls, and so I'm rooting for a nice little South Florida trajectory because they're playing in Buffalo. Their first round games are in Buffalo. If you're looking for a little hometown upset pick.
I know I'm cheering against them. We mentioned this in our little production meeting before we went live. I'm going against Florida, but something that just came to mind for the real Jazz sickos out there, and I hope this is as deep of a cut as we could possibly cut. For fans of arguably the most overachieving Jazz team in franchise history since they arrived to Utah, the 2003-2004 edition of the Utah Jazz, which against all odds, I think going into that season, they were expected to maybe challenge the 1972-1973 Philadelphia 76ers for fewest wins in NBA history. They exceeded all expectations and went 41-41 that season, led in part by the much ballyhooed legendary big man, Ben Hanlogton. I believe his son, Micah Hanlogton, just celebrated senior day a few weeks back with the University of Florida. So,
wow.
If you're a Jazz fan, maybe that's one direction you could go and is cheering for Micah Hanlogton and the Florida Gators.
Does he actually get minutes? I don't know.
He did last season. You may have to cut this part from the podcast because now I can't remember if I'm hallucinating, and he graduated last year.
Well, we're fine to let you do some live research on when a Hanlogton...
No, he has stats.
Okay.
Micah Hanlogton has 32 games worth of stats this season. So he's averaging 4 points per game, nearly 6 boards per game. So
he's really
maybe
playing.
he could be fodder for they're not going to be here right away, but when the Seattle Supersonics and Las Vegas High Rollers invariably hit the ground running in 3 years, perhaps there's a preseason roster spot available for Micah Hanlogton.
I'm thinking summer league end of bench guy that the Jazz sign for the Jazz Summer League and give David
the
Locke
marketing
something to
possibilities.
Giving David Locke something at all to talk about during Summer League besides our first round draft pick. But that is an interesting little beat. And of course, we're not above live radio fun and lookups around here. We're having fun on Salt City Hoops here. We will allow brief interludes for hold on, I have to look up something.
The more accurate stats, the better, right?
Yes. I frequently will say the phrase, this makes for great radio, but I really need to look up something because it's going to drive me nuts if I don't. But the Hanlogtons aside, this is before the Jazz know their actual draft pick. I mentioned this, all the possibilities are open. And this is a much ballyhooed draft class, not because of what is tantalizing at the very top. In fact, the top 2-3 players are actually not in the same class as a Cooper Flagg or even a Victor Wembanyama, or dare I say even a Zion Williamson or Anthony Davis coming out. I feel like even the very top picks of AJ DeBenz or Darren Peterson, you might even argue are a half tier below those guys, or at the same tier, whatever. But it's around that range. But the depth there are some tier breaks in the top 10, top 8, 9, 10 players, but if the Jazz pick 8th, we're going to walk away with a happy outcome and they're all going to be relevant in coming into this March Madness. And we want to do a quick show to say, like, hey, if you're an NBA sicko like us and you don't watch college basketball, well, we did the minimum amount of research necessary to have some fun with it today. and if you're listening to this on Thursday morning and you're thinking, well, The Office is going to have the games on. I filled out a bracket. I'm going to tune in. Well, what game should I care about? And is there a brief thing I should know about these guys before we do scouting? Or like the NBA draft will come along. You'll read all your draft preview blurbs and all that crap. But for now, it's more like, well, what does a guy like AJ DeBanza actually do out there? Like, I've heard of him. Or a guy like Ronald Acuff. I've heard this guy scores 1 trillion points. Who is this guy? Who does he play for? What should I be looking for? And maybe I'll actually tune into these games because that is what Justin and I are going to be looking into. So, Justin, I think we have to start with a player that probably, going against immediately what I just said, I think a player that a lot of Jazz fans have heard way too much about, or perhaps not enough, and that is however much money Ryan Smith paid to get AJ DeBanza to BYU has been worth it, because to say nothing of the rest of Brigham Young University's roster, he has been worth absolutely every penny. He is going to be at minimum a 3rd pick or 2nd pick, probably a 1st overall pick, but he's not falling below 3 at all. And he's playing for Brigham Young, but what did he do for Brigham Young this year that makes everyone so excited?
I think it's everything. I think he's the total package. If whether it's the stats, whether it's the eye test. Forgive me for taking a page from Dave Washington. I hope he doesn't. I hope it doesn't sue me for copyright infringement. But compared to the rest of the players we're going to discuss, like I've seen enough. Like AJ DeBonta, if his team didn't qualify for the NCAA tournament, I would be satisfied for what I've seen from him. The T-Mac comparisons, the other comparisons to other great NBA legends, recent Hall of Famers, crowned Hall of Famers to be the frame, 6'9", the way he can slash and get to the hoop. I really don't see any weaknesses for him. I think he'll slot in anywhere. And I think, if Utah was lucky enough to get a top 2 pick in the NBA draft and they ended up with AJ DeBonta, I tried not to get into hyperbole right away, but I don't see how any team, whether it's the Utah Jazz or any other of the 29 teams in the NBA, how if they get AJ DeBonta, how they fail to make the NBA Finals within the next 5 years. He's that transformative of a player to me. He's the kind of superstar wing that every single team is trying to find, and he's like a legitimate 6'9", if not still growing to me. He seems to be a great teammate. He knows what to do with the ball on the floor. I watched a lot of BYU over the last month. This is probably going to offend a lot of our viewers and listeners right off the bat. I think BYU, as much money as they have funneled in there by way of NIL, they've got the best player in the country on their roster, and he's the only good player on that team. And I think a lot of what you've seen in a cutthroat conference, and in my mind, I go back and forth. I lean towards the Big 12 being the best conference in college basketball this year, but they've had to take on a gauntlet of opponents, and consequently, they've had a lot of losses that I've kind of signed off on. It's not surprising. There's just not enough to go around AJ DeBonta, and I think they'll go as far as he can carry them. It's a great time to be in Portland. I was elated to find out that BYU was placed in the West region and got assigned to the Portland pod along with 7 other teams. It's going to be great. That fan base travels excellently. I hope they beat. Texas is who they're matched up against in that 6-11 matchup. I think they can beat Texas, but after that, I think Gonzaga is going to get into the second weekend from that part of the pod. But I'm interested to see how far DeBonta can drag this team, because as limited as that roster is, he can do it all. He can create. Now, the question is, what happens when he gets triple or quadruple teamed? Because I've seen that happen time and time again in multiple games. But who else is going to step up alongside AJ DeBonta to help that team along? But he's this dynamic player, and I think for me, I've been saying online, it's not rocket science when it comes to AJ DeBonta. Sometimes when you get into the draft lottery and you're ranking first 10 guys and then 15 guys, the full first round, the entire draft overall, you really tend to nerd out, and you have to take a fine-tooth comb and apply it to everything and, compare the splits of one guy to another. With AJ DeBonta, to me, it's just clear. Maybe I'll be wrong and look like an idiot in 5 years, but with players like him, the strengths are just so glaring across the board in terms of what he's able to do, the way he understands the game, where he's supposed to be on the floor. He can play with and without the ball, and I think at the end of the day, he's going to be able to play at least 4 positions. So he's really exciting. He required the least amount of research for me and viewing and evaluating prior to our call tonight, because I'm just sold on him. There's no more selling to do. Sit back and enjoy BYU, and hopefully they can play well against Texas tomorrow.
He's also the player I have learned the most about by osmosis because of the proximity to Utah. So I have seen him a bit, and I've seen the quote-unquote bad games, and I just look at it and I'm like, holy cow, that's a bad game for him. He looks amazing, right? And it's
if this is the floor.
Yeah, it's turnovers, it's missed shots. It's like, okay, these are going to happen in basketball games, especially when you're a little overloaded, a little over responsibility. I'm hoping we get a lot more Brigham Young University in this tournament. I fully expect them to beat Texas, who had to do a play-in game to make the tournament. I'm also biased against
Texas. And we're
not
particularly impressed with last night,
yes,
in my opinion.
I watched that game. I wasn't particularly taken away by Texas. They have some good stuff going on. My main thing against Texas, this comes back to Buffalo. Texas coached by Sean Miller. Sean Miller coached Arizona when they got upset by Buffalo in the first round. So I'm like, I have this bias against Sean Miller being relevant at all. But I feel like Brigham Young University should be able to make it past Texas. Then they would play Gonzaga most likely if they beat Kennesaw State. And Gonzaga's Gonzaga. We know they've also, this is not the strongest Gonzaga team in the world. And then you run into Purdue, most likely as a 2 seed. Purdue's number one strength is very, very, very efficient offense, or so the words that I read tell me. Again, not a college basketball expert, not going to pretend to be. And the number one knock against DeBonsa specifically, and the rest of the BYU, is the defense isn't exactly like trying out there a whole lot, and really efficient clockwork offense tends to take advantage of defenses that don't try 100% of the game. So it's bring DeBonsa in an NBA environment, he's going to have to try. One of my favorite things about Utah possibly drafting DeBonsa, and this goes into not necessarily what you're watching tomorrow, but a concern, an imaginary concern I have, is if the Jazz get the number one pick, this will be very similar to the Spurs getting the number 2 pick last year, where the roster's set. The starting roster is set. So where are you plugging in a guy like Dylan Harper? And there was actually concern of like, I don't know, they already got Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox. Are they really going to draft Dylan Harper? And sure enough, they were like, yeah, no, we trust our culture, to use one of your favorite words, to say like, yeah, that in all caps, that we're satisfied. He's going to be satisfied coming off the bench because this is going to be a championship contending team that's led by a coach and a star player in Wembanyama that you have to get behind. Will we have the panache to tell AJ DeBonsa or Ace Bailey, hey, one of you two guys is coming off the bench? I think with DeBonsa, at least, Ace Bailey has a whole bunch of what we now have learned is unfounded ego. Like, he is in fact the funniest, egoless guy that you could have. Jazz are thrilled with him. Who knows? But with DeBonsa, perhaps there is some Utah connection, some Ryan Smith connection, where he's going to really trust the entire organization from the top down if he has to come off the bench for a little bit. So, whereas a guy like Darren Peterson, which we'll get to, I have a little bit more concern that he'll be thrilled with the idea of coming off the bench for a team. But DeBonsa, I see a very, 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 very high floor. And sometimes I'm very hesitant to say, oh, this guy's an all-star, this guy's all-NBA. I love looking at the floor instead. And for him, I just see a guy who's going to be in the NBA for 14 years.
Yeah, I also did a similar exercise before we jumped on this call, because I was trying to remember who the starting 5 was on opening night when Utah absolutely steamrolled the Clippers, and had already forgotten that Svi Mihalyuk was the starting 2 guard that night, along with obviously Walker Kessler. But the projected starting 5 right now, just knowing on paper today, not knowing, I should say, what the draft pick's going to be, where it's going to land, and God forbid we somehow Utah climbs in the standings, and with the horrendous luck, I don't even want to talk about this out loud, but in my opinion, the Jazz don't have a draft pick until they have a draft pick in mid-May on that upcoming fateful night. The projected starting 5 as of today would be Keontae George, Ace Bailey, Larry Markkanen at small forward, Triple J at the 4, and Walker Kessler. Again, some good things have to happen, and potential bad simulations. We're not going to think about that right now or even hint about it. That could be our most likely starting 5 for next year. So in that case, if it were AJ DeBonsa, it would probably come down to a debate between do the Jazz shift Ace Bailey back to the bench and start AJ DeBonsa at the 2, or do you bring AJ DeBonsa off the bench and, be the de facto 6th man for the time being, and we'll see how long it takes before he explodes.
And I think you'd have to do the former, just because Ace Bailey, the last I saw, he was 4-7 from 3 tonight. Like, his 3-pointer is really coming around. That Jazz lineup, as much as we love the idea of Jaren Jackson Jr. having some range, and Lauri Markkanen has some range. Keontae George is not exactly Steph Curry out there. Walker Kessler, we saw a little bit of flirtation with it last year. That's a lineup that needs shooting. And you can say DeBonsa can come in for any one of those five guys, including Keontae, as far as like, okay, maybe he's not going to be your backup point guard, but you could say, hey, if Keontae gets hurt 2 minutes into the game and you're throwing out DeBonsa out there, you could cobble together some sort of lineup, and he's going to get us 30 to 35 minutes either way. With Ace Bailey, he has to fit in certain different lineups. Either way, it's massive, massive, massive flexibility.
This is best case scenario in an argument we could only dream of having right now. But the thing I'll say about that potential ego battle you alluded to, Ace Bailey, there's not really an established king of the castle yet on this Jazz roster. Obviously, Markkanen is the respected veteran. Kessler's suddenly one of the premier centers in the league. He'll be entering his fifth year next year. But if the decision was between Ace Bailey and DeBonsa as that final player, Ace has only been on the team for a year, so there's not as much of like a pre-established. No one's really locked down their spot yet, so I don't think there would be as many personalities to potentially offend if, for whatever reason, the Jazz decided to go with DeBonsa, the starting five, or continue to roll with Ace Bailey going to next year as their starter. But again, those are recipes to be baked long down the road right now as it stands on March 18th, 2026.
The stakes will, as they get higher, will put more of a spotlight on this. But I have been wildly impressed with Will Hardy's ability to coach around ego and personalities. I think keeping a team happy and driven during this stretch is impossible. You can see bad teams being bad. We saw it with Steven Silas. We're seeing it with Brian Keefe. Like, there are ways that a bad coach is not helping the team grow and everything. This is a team that loves playing for him, and he's going to manage these egos just fine. So the other guy, because I just as a quick spoiler, I think Cam Boozer will neatly fit on the bench in his rookie year. I don't think he's, especially in Utah with the Boozer Connect, we'll get to that. But the other guy with the quote-unquote, this is a guy who probably has aspirations to start and play 35 minutes right away in the NBA, is Darren Peterson coming out of Kansas, who, this is where I'm curious on your perspective watching basketball for as many years as you have, Mr. Sweeney, is I'm not a college guy. I don't watch a lot of college basketball, I'll say for the fifth time on this podcast. I wonder if people will realize that by now. But I do know that our current era of college sports, which as a baseline matter, yeah, the people putting in the work should be getting the money, but it does allow for players to look at, well, I got whatever money I have, I'm going to the NBA soon, how much do I really have to care about playing for the University of Kansas? And allegations of not allegations, but like Peterson allegedly had cramps, allegedly had sore muscles and whatever. And so he didn't play a whole lot for Kansas this year, but he's going to the tournament allegedly fully healthy. If I'm in Darren Peterson's camp, I'm telling him, do you see the difference between how much money the third overall pick and the first overall pick get in the rookie scale? Like, it's several $1 million. So if you come and you get Kansas to the Elite Eight, let alone a Final Four, and you just look spectacular doing so, you're going to skyrocket past DeBonsa or even Cam Boozer, right, for a number 1, number 2 overall pick. You have money on the table that you can earn right now. You've run out of chances. Maybe he actually has been hurt the whole year. It's just that he just takes himself out of games. It's been a lot of cloudiness around a situation, and whenever it's cloudy around a certain player situation, fans are left to have conjecture, and we tend to go to the worst case scenario. So who is Darren Peterson? What do you think about his affect? Am I overreacting? Am I overstating his perhaps willingness to compete?
Yeah, so I'm going to do the same thing that Darren Peterson's been doing all year. I'm going to kind of straddle your answer and make an argument for both sides because he's kind of invited that with his tenure at Kansas. I think if you watch Darren Peterson, if you just took like an analytic software program and it was all blue dots and let's say they're yellow dots as the opponent, and you just watch the blue dot of Darren Peterson working in harmony and watch the 3-point shots and the passing and all of the production, you'd be enamored with Darren Peterson. But when you're actually watching the games, and I've had really weird luck with watching Kansas now. Again, I spend most of my time watching the NBA and very little college basketball until usually, unless, I'm at home over the holidays plays and there's a compelling tournament on, I'm usually not watching college basketball until the turn of the new year and really gearing up in mid-February and beyond. And I keep seeming to not catch Darren Peterson at the right time. One of the classic examples is, I think it was a Monday night about a month ago, and I was watching the Winter Olympics, and then I was like, oh, I'm scrolling through my app and I'm like, oh, Kansas is on right now. I should go check out Darren Peterson. Looks like he's playing well. I turn on the game as halftime's ending against Oklahoma State, and I think Darren Peterson shot like 6 for 7 from 3-point range in the first half. And then I'm turning around to go get, I don't know, a chicken tender or something, and he hits a jump shot. And I situate myself back at the couch, and the minutes go by, and I'm waiting for him to check back in, and it gets down to 10 minutes, and Kansas is just nursing like this back and forth 2-point differential between like a 15-point lead, 17-point lead, down to 11, back up to 15. It gets down to 7 minutes, and I'm like, well, I guess they're just good without Darren Peterson. And there's been enough instances this season where he hasn't been fully available, but when he's been available, he's been amazing. And then I think it was the following Saturday, they went up to Iowa State, who, if we have time to jump into, they're one of the teams I'm really keen on observing in the next couple of weeks, depending on how far they go. But Iowa State basically just boat raced them at a Hilton Coliseum. And I think Darren Peterson, he tried to play, but again, there was this cloudiness. That's the perfect word you used to describe his 1-year tenure at Kansas. He's got all the talent in the world. If the Jazz end up with him at number 2 and DeBonce's off the board at number 1, like, I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. I will be doing cartwheels. I will be popping off confetti. He seems like a can't miss player, but again, there's nights when he plays and he's really, really solid. Again, really high floor. Just the best all-around pure scorer in college basketball. There's no debate about that. His understanding and knack and feel for the game, he can drive. He looks majestic going to the hoop. He really looks effortless. I think DeBonce, when you watch him, he actually looks more exciting. He attacks the rim like Garnett or T-Mac, whereas with Darren Peterson, it's so smooth, you almost think he's, and I don't know if this contributes to the perception of him. Sometimes it looks like he's not trying because he just looks like he has that effortless coasting to the hoop where he really just looks like there's not a lot of effort involved in doing it with, when obviously we know it's an incredible gift the way he gets to the hoop. And again, like, if you need a knockdown automatic 3-point shooter, Darren Peterson's the number 1 choice. But that's why I love DeBonce so much, is because we see DeBonce show up every night. He's played 40 minutes. I don't know if that's meant to be a subtweet against Darren Peterson, but DeBonce just seems like there's nothing for me to doubt. He's the much more sure thing, and they both, to me, have almost equally similar ceilings. So why would you take the risk with the Kansas kid when you know, like, you're at least 90% sure what A.J. DeBonce is going to give you as a professional?
Yeah, the more interesting conversation to me so far is going to be Peterson versus Boozer. But this is part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, is to think like, hey, these are players that I want to watch this weekend and beyond. To like, I think DeBonce's kind of made his case during this. You said it pretty accurately. I think that you've seen all you need to see. Like, the tournament isn't really going to change your opinion of if DeBonce throws up a total egg against Texas. Okay, 1 game sample size. We'll see you in the NBA. But Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer and all these other players we're going to talk about, they can change their trajectory and millions of dollars here. And why I'm curious about it. And if Peterson's whole thing is strictly medical, and he's got a camp telling him like, dude, if you're not feeling good, do not tear an ACL. Do not tear an Achilles tendon. Like, you see what's happening with all these Achilles tendons?
The next couple of weeks is not worth it.
Yes. Like, don't negative step out there and tear an Achilles. And I can totally see that happening. I also know the Jazz are being run by psychopath athletic mindsets of the Ainge family. Ryan Smith, as much as he's a backwards hat, cool guy, you don't get into Ryan Smith's position at his age and working in the company that he works for without being a ruthless kind of guy. So I think there's and Will Hardy's obviously a hyper-competitive young coach. I think when
lots of grinders.
Yes, very, very grind set mentality of this team. And when you're looking at a guy like Keontae George, a big reason they drafted him was for his mindset. And we're sitting there for 2 years being like, what mindset are you talking about? Sure enough, it just clicked for him as to what he needed to do, and he already had the mindset. So if Darren Peterson,
like a Jekyll Hyde flip switch.
Yes. And they saw the makeup inside. They just needed to flip the right switch. And with Darren Peterson, if it's strictly medical and the guy gives a shit, like, yeah, surefire, at least a number 2 thing. But if they dive in and it's like, man, I don't know if you're just trying to get paychecks for 10 years, then maybe you have a fabulous career to emulate would be John Wall, where, yeah, had and Bradley Beal almost too, coincidentally, like nice careers, but are you psychopathic in your nature to succeed? Quick aside with John Wall, if you haven't seen the clip of John Wall naming where all sorts of random NBA players went to college,
he beat my score.
Unbelievable. And the best.
I didn't know where Jake LaRavia went. That was one of the many that he nailed.
I had no idea. No, I still couldn't tell you right now where Jake LaRavia went to school. I want to say Memphis, but no, he played for the Grizzlies. Like, I had no idea.
Played for the Grizzlies.
But John Wall on Prime's coverage of the NBA, and just thrilling to have a guy out there on the couch for Amazon Prime doing NBA stuff who actually cares about the game. I love it. I love these.
And another former Lexington resident, certainly doesn't hurt the cause.
Yeah.
Here's the funny thing.
We haven't mentioned you've spent a fair amount of time in your life in Lexington, so you have a little Kentucky affinity.
Yeah, 6 years in the Great Bluegrass, around the same time that John Calipari was there, who also will be coming to Portland this weekend with his Arkansas Razorbacks. Here's the interesting thing about BYU and Kansas and the whole overall DeBonsa Peterson conversation. It's going to be a lot more instructive and helpful. It almost doesn't matter to me. Now, I'm not a BYU fan, so again, sorry to offend those out there who want to see the Cougars advance far. That would certainly be a fun story. It doesn't really hurt either way if BYU gets eliminated tomorrow on Saturday. It's a lot more instructive the further Kansas goes, because I need to find out a lot more about Darren Peterson and to see how him and his team and that whole team context are going to fare against whatever up-and-coming blue bloods they might run into. St. John's, if they win, I thought St. John's is a horribly underseeded team, and I'm not the first person saying this week. As a 5 seed in the East region, to me, they kind of seem like a low 3 seed at least. They beat UConn a couple times, and there's a conversation about UConn. Are they rated too high as a 2 seed? But again, we know nothing about college basketball.
Well,
that's going to be a big
as a
test
brief
if
thing
Kansas
on
and St. John's.
To go on the St. John's point, though, even in not knowing anything about college basketball, but reading about who St. John's is a tough-as-nails, defensive-oriented team led by Rick Pitino as the coach. So what you're looking for is like, hey, I don't care about college basketball, but I'm interested in Darren Peterson. Well, seeing Darren Peterson go up against that sort of defensive squad is exactly the kind of thing that you're looking for as a casual a fan looking for a good draft pick.
That's the question on Saturday if they face St. John's. How assertive is Darren Peterson going to be? I want to see if he's going to try and take over that game or defer to his teammates. And unlike DeBonta's situation at BYU, Darren Peterson's got a ton of competent teammates around him. They've got a lot of good guards. Ricky Council, number 3, I think his last name is White. Again, this is how much I know about college basketball. But Badunga, the big inside, he's also a primetime performer. And that's really the difference to me between BYU and Kansas. And in fact, they played each other in Allen Fieldhouse, I think back in January. And Kansas, for the most part, even though the score was closer, Kansas really had its way with BYU most of the game. But I think that's reflective of the difference in the overall talent of both rosters. But again, going back to these potential second round matchups, and if Kansas is able to advance into the second weekend, I want to see how much Darren Peterson shines as an individual performer. And if his teammates need some help, need some bailout, like, is he going to take over the game and show off why he should be a number 2 caliber pick in the upcoming draft?
And a player that can play with Keontae George, no problem. Obviously, he's a ball handler, he's a passer. I think Jazz fans, we fall into the John Stockton category of there's going to be a point guard who passes a ball to a player who will shoot the ball. And the modern offenses, especially what we've seen from Will Hardy this year, not just with the use of Nurkic triple-double adventures that we've seen, but we saw it with the 8 games that Walker Kessler played, that we were putting the ball in Walker Kessler's hands and letting him do a whole lot of passing from the top of the arc or in interesting positions. So the passing is going to be very much distributed, not just from, okay, I mentioned the centers, but from everybody on the floor, unless you're just not good at it. And Lauri Markkanen is not good at it, so they don't ask him to do so. This team needs ball handling and passing. It is very possible to play Darren Peterson and Keontae George together. And when we get into other guard-sized players that we should be looking for in March Madness coming up, I want to keep that in mind, that Darren Peterson is not just like, oh, is this what are we doing with Keontae George's extension? No. Jazz are still in talent building mode, and a quick roster building concept, diversion here. It's very important that the Jazz nail this lottery. And the reason I say that is obviously it's easier to nail if they get a top 2-3 pick, get a good player. But even if they pick 6th, 7th, 8th, the Jazz get preposterously expensive coming up soon. And it's not just the price of their team. They have zero surplus value out of any of their good players. Once you give Walker his new contract and you give Keontae George his extension, there's no bargains on this team anymore. Nobody's on a rookie contract except for Ace Bailey, who to this point is a net negative player. We're kind of hoping he becomes good surplus value, but right now he's nothing. So the Jazz need to add surplus value. The easiest way to do that is the artificially deflated rookie scale contracts. Getting a DeBonsa, getting a Peterson in the door for 10, 11, 12, 13, $14 million, when in 2 years they could be worth $35 million. So that's why I care about this March Madness.
It almost evokes the analogy of these. I hate to do this because I'm not the biggest fan of this team, but it evokes the roster building ideas of these Super Bowl teams that win with good young players. Russell Wilson, when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl back in the 2014 season, he was the quarterback on a rookie scale because he was like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. But you really build these NFL teams with all this really young talent who have not yet gained the big contracts, and then you marry them with the stars and the primetime players on your team who are making the big bucks. But you need to have a lot of talent from those rookie scale contracts, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of a trend under this new collective bargaining agreement where you still have to. Star power matters more than anything in the sport of basketball, particularly the NBA. But I think there's more of an advantage that's being derived from these 10 to 11 man deep rosters. And a lot of that comes from having multiple high quality players who are in their rookie through 3rd seasons in the league.
And the Jazz do not own any other draft pick in this draft coming up. They don't have their own 2nd round draft pick that will be with the San Antonio Spurs by virtue of the trade of that pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the Wolves later traded the pick to San Antonio. The Jazz traded their 2026 2nd round pick to Minnesota as part of dumping Nickeil Alexander-Walker's contract to make the Mike Conley trade work. So that whole trade, to remind you, the Jazz got the Lakers' top 4 protected pick in 2027. In order to make that work, they needed to kind of move some salary around, and the Lakers were interested in D'Angelo Russell from the Wolves. But the Wolves were basically held both the Lakers and the Jazz hostage and said, we're only getting this deal done if we get a couple 2nd round picks. And the Lakers were more satisfied to let the deal die than Utah was. And so Utah coughed up 2 2nd round picks to make Nickeil Alexander-Walker fit nicely in Minnesota. Alexander-Walker, as we all know, has turned into a very nice player. And so that was not a very good piece of business for the Jazz. However, that 2027 top 4 protected Lakers pick turned into Jaren Jackson Jr. So just a note as to what's happening in this draft. So as you're watching March Madness, the Jazz could buy their way into the end of the 2nd round. So some of these fledgling players, maybe we'll talk about them at the end as end of the 2nd round picks. But like the only players to really pay attention to right now to get that surplus value that you're mentioning, Justin, is one of these top 10 possible picks. And if Kansas not only goes to the 2nd round and beats a very good St. John's team, or perhaps Northern Iowa, they would run into what is another surefire, at least 3rd overall pick in Cam Boozer. And I I see the story. I actually do think that there is some sort of poetic destiny that the Jazz end up with DeBonsa or Boozer. I feel it in my bones. The Boozer thing is just too good to be true because I don't see Boozer falling past 3 based on who was left on the board, but I think there are some fair criticisms of that are very reminiscent of his father. The reason I have such a soft spot for Carlos Boozer is, first of all, I was in high school, college during those years. So that's when I am really leaning into my hardcore Utah Jazz fandom. Is like those Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer teams really drew me back in. And 2, Carlos Boozer didn't only just choose Utah as a free agent, he caused goddamn controversy in doing so. He was willing to besmirch his identity in the league to come to the Jazz and spurn the Cleveland Cavaliers. And he's currently, I think, still employed by the team as a scout. I know he was employed by a team by a scout at least as recently as last year. He's around the team all the time, loves the Jazz. The idea of a toolsy, do-it-all player. So Cam Boozer's just like his dad, only he can pass and shoot better. But I feel like Carlos Boozer...
Carlos Boozer 2.0.
Carlos Boozer would be what Cam is doing if he played in modern times. Like, Carlos Boozer would learn how to... Okay, I have to pass more as a big. I have to have more range as a big. Carlos Boozer did what he was asked to do and did it really well. Cam Boozer has the same build and everything as Carlos Boozer, only he can shoot better and pass more. Your main defects on Carlos Boozer are that dude's not protecting anything at the rim. He's slow of foot, and those are really the 2 things. He did everything else.
And in his last season, the bitter taste left in my mouth was the health issues that I think he missed probably off and on 35 to 40 games, it felt like, at the end of the 2010 season. At a time they really could have used him, even though it simultaneously allowed Paul Millsap to bloom.
Yeah, thank God for Paul Millsap. Allowed those teams to still be great playoff teams at the end of the day. So that's what Cam Boozer is. And Duke, if they don't win the title, will be considered a disappointing season for them. So for me, what I'm watching out of Cam Boozer is more, hey, if you get into a tie, over, like if Kansas doesn't win a game, if they lose to Cal Baptist in the first round, and he puts up 12 points on...
Shout out Danny Cross.
A guy that I don't know who he is, but apparently people...
My former SID colleague who matriculated from there and later became the SID at my treasured alma mater, George Fox.
Cheers. Hope you're listening.
Connections everywhere.
Hopefully this individual, Mr. Cross, gets a shout out and he listens to the show and gives a subscription, as you all should. As a little plug on that one. So if Darren Peterson flames out and we're the Jazz get the 2nd overall pick, and Cam Boozer has this wildly successful tournament where he shows off his flaws and he shows off what he's good at, this is a guy who will be a bench forward, if not a starting forward, an all-star potential forward. I shouldn't even start with bench forward. Like that's his floor, but his reasonable outcome is Carlos Boozer, which is a starting forward for 12 to 14 years. And right now, that is a player who would fit perfectly on the Jazz bench. And with that level of IQ and shooting, this is a net neutral or net slightly negative player as a rookie that can help the Jazz win a playoff game.
Yeah, to me, Cam Boozer is the clear number 3 guy in this draft. Now, obviously, I have my biases, but I was talking earlier about AJ DeBonta. I can visualize him being on a team that goes to the NBA Finals and being like the number 1 guy in that team that goes to the finals in the next 5 years. I would also say if Darren Peterson hits his ceiling, everything goes right. There's no cloudiness in the NBA like there's been at the college level. This one-year little stop through Lawrence, Kansas. I think he can also be a part of a team, a leader on a team that makes the NBA Finals. It's a little bit harder for me to visualize that with Cam Boozer, at least with him as the guy. Now, again, maybe I'm getting too far over my skis worrying about the future 5 years from now. But I'm still trying to figure out, and of those top 3 guys who will likely go top 3 in the draft, I need to spend the most time watching Cam Boozer, because when I've taken a glimpse at Duke, it's really hard for me because I love Carlos Boozer too for slightly different reasons. We're both from Alaska. I have vivid memories of watching him win the 4A state title for Juneau Douglas High School on TV when I was a youngster. I then watched him go to Duke after I watched him follow in the footsteps of my favorite college basketball player ever on my favorite college team ever, Trajan Langdon in the 1999 Duke Blue Devils. And then Carlos Boozer, as we all know, went on to be a key piece of the 2001 national championship team. But it's hard for me to separate Cam Boozer from Carlos Boozer. And I'm not talking about the mindset or anything or how Carlos's career played out. I see a lot of his dad when he plays. I'm talking about his position on the floor. A lot of it seems to be post-up based. Now, obviously, he can do a lot. The ball goes through him. But when I watch an NBA game, like the post-up game is extinct. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what's Cam Boozer going to look like at the next level. Now, obviously, he again is like Carlos with all the bells and whistles of the modern 2020s game. He can pass. He's a team guy. He's obviously a winning player. But when you compare him to DeBonsa and Peterson, I'm still trying to figure out how he might surface potentially as like a number one guy on the floor. Maybe he needs his Keontae George, who is our Darren Williams in the modern iteration of the Utah Jazz, to set him up for success. I think DeBonsa is much more like the sun, whereas I think Cam Boozer might be like Jupiter. But again, you can't go wrong with Cam Boozer if you have the number 3 overall pick in the draft.
If Cam Boozer averages 25 points a game on his way to a title and Darren Peterson flames out in the first round, does that change your opinion at all, or are we overstating things? Am I overstating things?
I'm going to need more data because I don't, even though, and I think this worked the other way. 2 years ago when Stephon Castle was on UConn, I absolutely fell in love with Stephon Castle. And I was like, this is the guy. Like, what are we doing here? We don't need to evaluate anything else. Obviously, there's these international prospects which have everybody all hot and bothered. But from what I've seen, this guy, once he gets a more consistent jump shot, that's like Kawhi Leonard 2.0. Lo and behold, he went to the San Antonio Spurs. But I really developed my opinion of Stephon Castle off of like 3 to 5 weeks of watching him play for UConn. That turned out to be correct. In Cam Boozer's case, the longer he goes with Duke, which again, like reinforces the need for Kansas and Duke, obviously only one of them can theoretically make a deep run, but it would be helpful to see one of these two teams go really deep so that we can have more data. I want to see Cam Boozer, how far he can push a team as it appears he's going to be the college player of the year as a freshman, which is impressive. But now I want to see him do it on the biggest of stages weekend after weekend as the pressure continues to increase. I want to see all these players. I want to see how they fare against increasing amounts of pressure over and over again.
So the number one thing that intrigues me about Cam Boozer that I'm going to be watching more intensely, because I have not watched a single minute of Duke basketball this year, is I see the assists per game, and I hear people tell me he's a good passer. You mentioned the post-up oriented offense. I'm going to be very, very interested to see, okay, you got 5 assists in this tournament game. What did those passes look like? Because there's a very big difference, and I have this criticism of Isaiah Collier too, which is, it comes across as a criticism, but can be a compliment depending on, like, glass half full kind of things, is if they're just basic passes that he's making because he just has the ball a lot, okay, so you have a mindset towards team basketball, but this isn't like a B or A skill. This is just a good mindset that, okay, that's nice to have. If he's manipulating defenses with surprising passes, or where he takes a dribble one way and that makes the defense overreact to him, and he does that on purpose to shift the ball over to a more open teammate, right? It's the equivalent of a quarterback looking off a defender, right? Where it's like, I'm not looking for, Jokic no-look passes, but are you manipulating a defense to make passes? Isaiah Collier, he has mastered every single basic pass in the NBA toolbook. There isn't a single basic pass that he cannot make, and he's fabulous at all of them. I want to see him learn how to manipulate defenses now with his speed. to lead into passes, and we're starting to see glimmers of that, but not a whole lot. And with Debonsa, it's kind of the same story as well. He's averaging 3-4 assists a game. I'm going to be watching. Okay, are these just like happenstance passes? And I know he averaged those passes to a sharpshooter that tore his ACL for BYU, and a few of those passes went to him. So going to be looking, how do you make these 3, 4, 5 assists per game, not just the fact that you made these passes. So that'll be something I'm looking at Cam Boozer especially.
And one of the reasons I'm already so convinced on A.J. Debonsa the times watching him, again, I don't have a high opinion of BYU's overall roster. I've seen Debonsa create so many shot opportunities for his other teammates. They're just not making shots because they are not above average college basketball players. And when I see these incredible passes that A.J. Debonsa against double teams is throwing overhead across the court to create to a BYU teammate who clanks an open corner three, I'm thinking that's Larry Markkinen next season. He's going to hit 50% of those shots. Again, with Cam Boozer, it's a limited sample size for me. It feels like, again, it's not as bad or glaring as my luck with trying to catch Darren Peterson in Kansas at a good time. But whenever I catch Duke on TV, it seems like they're playing someone who's not strong. One time it was like Syracuse, and then they were playing Clemson, and they were just mopping the floor with them. So again, it's like Cam Boozer's doing what they're supposed to do. I'm excited to see how Cam Boozer and Duke fare against St. John's or Kansas or Michigan State or UConn down the road, and inevitably maybe someone like Arizona, team which I'm very high on. And I don't know if we're going to be doing any spoilers, but Arizona's probably, outside of the teams that we mentioned so far, the ones that are coming to Portland, that's the team that I'm going to allot the most of my bandwidth to watching week after week, presuming they go far at 32-2 overall. I believe they're the number one overall seed, if not Duke, in the tournament.
Yeah, they're my limited information bracket. I am infatuated. So my approach to brackets every year always fails, but I will I will continue to do it. I'm a little biased as a Western New Yorker who I hate Syracuse University because of my Buffalo Legions now. But watching the Carmelo Anthony title team, I am infatuated with the idea of a team led by one obvious NBA star carrying a team through. So I have, and this is actually a great segue, I think, to my next question, as I have Arizona losing to Arkansas in my bracket, because I just love this Acuff kid out of Arkansas. He's an obvious top 6, top 7 pick, top 5 pick perhaps in the NBA draft. I think he's Trae Young 2.0, maybe a little bit less range, but a little bit more skill. Well, I think we should talk about this in a minute. So I love Arizona has a lot of NBA player. I think they're going to have 3 first-round draft picks, but they don't have anyone at the level of Acuff. So that's kind of where I'm at there. And which leads into my next question is like the consensus, which is usually about 80%, but I'm going to use that word consensus. Number 4 pick is a player who won't play in March Madness, of Caleb Wilson for North Carolina. So the point of this is to say, who are you watching this weekend? We're not watching Caleb Wilson. So we'll talk about him more this summer as we prepare for the draft. Hopefully the Jazz are in a position to think about him. Hopefully they're not. Hopefully they have the number 1 pick. We don't even think about this.
Hopefully this is all a moot point, and everything that just came to now, that's the only part of this podcast that you need to splice, and everything that comes after now you can throw out the window.
So we don't need to shortchange anyone. We can go as long as we want to. We're having fun with this, but I will give you the choice of where we go next, considering that the Jazz they have the 5th possible lottery odds. In a fun quirk, the least likely pick for the Jazz would be 5th, actually. They have more chance. They would either pick top 4 or they would pick 6, 7, 8. So they probably won't pick 5th. But if they were to pick 5th, would you want to go with Keaton Wagler out of Illinois? Would you want to talk about Darius Acuff out of Arkansas? Mikael Brown, who might not play this weekend for Louisville? Or do you have somebody else in mind that you want to talk about? Kingston Flemings.
I can't do Kingston Flemings. I've been arguing with a lot of people on the internet about Kingston Flemings, and I think here's what I think about Kingston Flemings.
All right, let's talk Kingston Flemings. Well, it's your choice. You don't have to talk about him.
I'll dabble in Kingston Flemings, but I won't spend a lot of time on Kingston Flemings. I'll defer to you on Kingston Flemings, but I'll say this about him. He's listed at 6'4". I need to stand next to him to be convinced that he is 6'4". I don't know if it's his wiry frame, the fact that he's like 180 pounds, maybe soaking wet, but I think he is, when the sun rises highest, he is maybe 6'2" on his best day. You know me. I'm a team that I'm a person that if I were constructing a roster, I want, as the old say, I want length. I need a roster full of folks who are, if they're backcourt, 6'6" or taller. Keontae George is fine. He's a real 6'4", but he's the only shorty we can have. So I want to augment and supplement him with a big backcourt guard. I don't think Kingston Flemings fits that. I don't think he fits that definition or that qualification. Now, I'm really interested in Darius Acuff, who I'll jump into in a little bit. That I know obviously violates the tenet I just established 5 seconds ago. But for me, Kingston Flemings and Keontae George, they're both amazing basketball players. I think they are sadly too redundant to each other. I think if Keontae George is part of the long-term plans for the Jazz, there's no need to have Kingston Flemings. Despite from what we've seen, how dynamic, how exciting he is, he's going to help someone great. I think he would be a beautiful fit. This would hurt to watch as a Jazz fan. I think he would be a beautiful fit on a team like the Dallas Mavericks, forming a 1-2 punch. The big man forward, Cooper Flagg, playing off of Kingston Flemings with the Texas connection. I think those two would go together like rice and fish. But for the Jazz, I don't see Kingston Flemings fitting super well with Keontae George. Now, with that being said, I am a big fan.
Who does excite you? Let's get some excitement going.
Well, he's right here in Portland, Oregon this week, and that's going to be Darius Acuff of Arkansas. Now, again, he's only 6'3", but from what I've seen, the first time I watched him, I was like, okay, I see some twinges of Brandon Roy, but obviously, hopefully, with more health, with more dynamism. I think Brandon Roy topped off his highest scoring year for the Blazers, if I'm not mistaken, was like 20 or 21 points per game, even though he was rookie of the year. I think Acuff could be at least a 25 point per game scorer. He's a big assist man. The more I watched him and when I started to see the commentary, other folks online talking about him, breaking him down, I don't know if it's the fact he's got that similar body composition where he's just really solid. The way he moves with his crossover, I don't know if it's the fact that he wore number 5, like the person who comes to mind did at Illinois, or if they're both exactly 6'3", they both look to be 200 pounds, rippling strong. But it's hard to deny once the name's brought up, he reminds me of Darren Williams. And how could I pass on drafting the next Darren Williams to the Utah Jazz?
Well, as I prefaced, we're going to get into like actual scouting and shit once we know what the Jazz draft pick is. But this is about who are we looking for in March Madness. And the reason Acuff draws me is there are so many, if you read like NBA draft profiles on him right now, there's a lot of negatives. His height, defense, that sort of thing. Unlike Flemings, he's got, as you mentioned, he's got some stockiness to him. And it's not fat, it's stockiness. Like this dude is built. And
I feel like I'm really good at just one of my random talents. Maybe I'm not good at it and I'm just self-glossing. I feel like I have this skill where I can see someone on TV and not be more than like an inch and a half off on just seeing someone and being like, that person is 6'6". That person is 6'1". It boggles my mind that Acuff is listed at 6'3" and Flemings is listed at 6'4", when like to me, Acuff is clearly a bigger guard than Kingston Flemings. I don't know if it's that difference in stockiness, and maybe if you line them up next to each other, they're head to head with each other. But just Acuff, to me, when I see him on TV, he presents as much bigger than Kingston Flemings.
So Acuff is one of the very few players that once I learned about what he's been doing the past month statistically, I was like, I gotta look. This is ridiculous. I gotta look at some clips of this guy. And one of my favorite euphemisms that I've ever heard about a player is, and it's not the only time this has been used on a player or whatever, but it was when David Locke, after we drafted Grayson Allen, was like, Grayson Allen's got amazing functional athleticism. And I was like, okay, it's a white guy who can dunk a lot. Like
new synonyms activated, new euphemisms activated.
So I was like, okay, functional athleticism. And when I
The non-sneaky version of sneaky athleticism.
That's what I mean. Like he's real. Like so he's not like he doesn't test well at the combine, but look at how he's like really getting to like above the rim in these circumstances. By the way, Locke wasn't wrong in that assessment, but it was more like okay, it's functional athleticism.
It took a while for it to age, but it eventually did age well.
Yes,
you can see that now with the role he's carved out in Phoenix.
Yeah, we don't actually talk enough about how good of a draft pick that was, but it got us Mike Conley, got us some good runs. So with Akov, I think a lot of the same thing. Now, not in the same way, but when you mentioned Flemings, and part of the reason I wanted to make sure that I brought him up is because I see the more explosiveness out of Kingston Flemings, but I see Akov getting way more space in creating offense with his feints and agility and mental game, where he's not slow and stocky and molasses out there. Kingston Flemings can go and really get up there. Acuff he's creating space with his quick feet, but also his ability to use a dribble move to get a guy off his back foot and do other things. I really love how much he gets caverns of space when the entire defense knows what he's trying to do.
That's when I see the shades of Darren, and that's an interesting thing you bring up about Kingston Flemings, because I think the number one pressing question to me, the more I watch Kingston Flemings, is okay, he's really wiry. He's doing this against college players. Yes, he's a freshman, so it's against older peers. But I wonder, is he going to have that strength in the burst to get that same separation in the NBA against NBA defenders, 10-year players, that he's been able to this year at Houston?
So I think this is a great point to say, like, hey, these are players where they could be very much available for the Jazz at 5, 6, 7, 8, both point guards. Do they play with Keontae George? I mentioned this, the Jazz team ball handling, who cares? So when you're watching Kingston Flemings at Houston, you're watching Acuff at Arkansas, those are players that, as you're watching the first couple rounds of these tournaments, you're looking for, hey, Kingston Flemings, what are you putting together besides just being an athlete, right? Is there, like, the defense, obviously Houston's team defense is otherworldly, as I read it. But I watched the tournament last year. I know what Kelvin Sampson can do. Houston has a great defense. Flemings fits right into that. Is Flemings contributing to that? Or is he a beneficiary of that? So I'm watching a little bit of that. And with Acuff, I want to see the magic continue. I want to see, 25 points a game for however many games you give it to us. And if he can upset Arizona because of him, it's a big difference between what he can do scoring wise and another player in the Jazz organization. I'm going to do a little bit of a super, super deep cut, but this is a current cut, is if you remember Max Asmus for Oral Roberts and the work that he did, I
have been to Summer League.
So he's playing for the Salt Lake City Stars right now. Now, the dude's like 5'9". I think I'm almost as tall as him, which is a problem in all respects. So there's defensive problems, whatever. He transferred out of Oral Roberts, but he could get space whenever he needed to, and he could shoot the ball. So I'm watching, can Acuff do a version of Asmus, maybe get an upset of Arizona, but do it at the 6'3" stocky level, and maybe set up his teammates for some stuff too. Calipari's his coach. We know Calipari marching isn't exactly the strongest thing, but I like the guy.
Well, I'm not worried about Calipari in March when it comes to evaluating Acuff, because I'm thinking about Calipari from the benefit of his past body of work when it comes to the point guard position. When I look at all of these different prospects, I think Darius Acuff comes from the formula that's like the most foolproof one across the board in terms of the predecessors he has followed. We're talking about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, John Wall, De'Aaron Fox, even Brandon Knight. I mean, John Calipari just on a regular basis is cranking out all-star caliber point guards at the next level, provided they stay healthy in the long run. But Arkansas is going to be fascinating to watch. They haven't put together any major win streaks other than the start of the season when they were facing off against lesser competition. But they're one of the top teams. They just won the SEC tournament.
Well, I was just going to say they've had an up and down year, but they've finished really strong against one of the very toughest conferences.
For me, the debate is who's the second best conference in the country. Is the Big Ten or is the SEC? Regardless of where you weigh out on that. Darius Acuff in Arkansas, they just won the SEC tournament a couple of days ago. Now they had some fortunate upsets on the other side of the bracket that paved the way for them to win the NCC tournament, but that's still a grind. You're facing off some really strong teams. I also think Vanderbilt, who they beat in the conference tournament championship game, is a really solid squad. But I think Arkansas is battle tested, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they face off with Arizona. I think in the Elite Eight, you're talking about one of the best teams in the SEC against the best team in what I think is the best conference in Arizona, and how that's all going to shake out. And that's going to be an excellent proving ground to see really, how strong and how elite against his peers Darius Acuff stands out.
It's interesting for both those two guys, and the guys we'll close up with here, is that yes, there's an entire body of work. Yes, there's a combine. Yes, there's interview portions and everything. But there's a very wide fluidity towards all of these 5 through 9 players that if you put together high stress performances that actually matter, that could earn you $1.5 million more than your colleague who failed in the same respect. So this, I've mentioned it before in the context of Darren Peterson versus Cam Boozer, but these games are not just, oh, do you care about Arkansas University or University of Arkansas? Do you have school pride to really give it the old gumption go and go win a national title? No, this matters for you personally. Like, are you good enough to make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million more in the NBA draft per year? Right, so I kind of stick on this. So Acuff, Kingston Flemings, both guys that could both rocket their stock up with a great tournament or stay where they are as kind of flawed guard. I don't think they'll sink, right? None of these good prospects will ruin their NBA futures or anything and end up like a 17th pick. They're all going to be top
Darren Peterson's not dropping past 5 if Kansas gets eliminated in the first round.
Dropping past 4, right? I mean, you could take a Caleb Wilson maybe over him, but like, nah, he's a guy, right? And even
why would you take that risk if you're a general manager?
I think if you're one of the bad teams, it depends on how the lottery shakes out. If you're a bad team, you got to take the risk on the talent. At the end of the day, if you are a Golden State Warriors and you jump up to 4, do you take something a little bit more surefire than Derek? We'll see. But
I think you take Peterson if you're the Warriors because you have to plan for the future. Stephen Curry's not going to be a spring chicken if he is anymore at all.
You got to do the 2 timelines. Now we're on 3 timelines with the Golden State Warriors. So we
jump back in your rocket ship and get light years ahead of everyone.
They're still light years ahead of us. We can't even fathom what they're doing. In fact, they're so far ahead of us that they've already won 3 more titles, and we haven't even seen it yet. Light years ahead of us. What a joke of a statement. Anyways, this is not a Warriors hate podcast, although it always can devolve into one at any time. Please.
Well, if they win the draft lottery, then it'll be a Warriors hate podcast.
Big problem out of here, unless we get the 2 or the 3, and then I'll bitch a little less.
Sure.
So
something for everyone in that case.
Some other guys who could really bump up their draft stock, and one guy in particular that I'm thinking we invoke Darren Williams, so I'm going to invoke his alma mater. Well, I don't know if he graduated, but his University of Illinois, and that's Keaton Wagler, who came into the entire year as the 250th rated prospect or whatever, and now he's a surefire lottery pick because they moved him to point guard, and he is dominating in all facets, less so defensively, but he's also has a gargantuan task offensively. Tall, thin point guard who can shoot the piss out of the ball, and when he's had to try defensively, he's looked pretty competent out there. Are you buying this meteoric rise from a guy that had no real chance of being a lottery pick before the year, or are you in on him?
My answer on him is kind of reminiscent of some of the other ones. I need more data because he played for Illinois. They're a high seed. I don't know a lot about Illinois. There's been some conflicting opinions on them. Some have accused Illinois of being a finesse team. I don't know if Wagler is the one who's responsible primarily for funneling that perception, but we know he can score. We know he can score a lot. He went off against a team who I think actually is perfectly peaking right now in Purdue. I think he went off for like 46 points against Purdue and they beat Purdue. So it wasn't just empty stats. Like he's obviously impacting this team in a
And
positive
46
way.
in college is like 60 in the NBA.
Yeah, when you're talking about the ratio and the reduced amount of possessions, it's a 40-minute game. Typically, college teams play less fast-paced in general. Now, obviously, Illinois, they're a pretty high-paced team given their scores. I think he scored double figures just about every single game, at least since back to like the end of November. But Wagler's interesting, and I almost think we're getting into this zone where it's almost like based on vibes. You're describing all these guards who are like ranging from 6'3" to 6'6". They're all extremely talented modern basketball players who can kind of be combo guards, play all positions, score when needed, score in volume, ball handle, all that stuff. So I'm curious to see. Illinois is one of these teams I'm demanding, I'm requesting that they make it far in the NCAA tournament so that I can watch Wagler and see how he fares, not against just one opponent, but several opponents. And the Big Ten, it was strong in parts. I'm not sure how Illinois will fare against the rest of the field. Now, I think they have a really optimal matchup in the first round. Even despite the coaching prowess of Fran McCaffrey in Penn. And then they run into two teams that are one's an 11 seed in VCU and North Carolina is incredibly flawed. So there is a pathway there for Illinois to advance at least into Houston. I like Houston coming out of that pod, and all of a sudden, then you got a real showdown and a juxtaposition of supreme guard talent potentially being drafted between 4 and 8 or 10, 4 and 10 between Wagler on one side and Kingston Fleming's on the other. So a lot of juicy potential matchups here for top 10 NBA picks.
Just like Darren Peterson going up against St. John's, we have a chance to see Wagler going against a fabulous defense in Houston. And you really can't let a one-game sample skew anything. But I'm a dumb NBA fan who doesn't watch college basketball, so the point of this show is to have fun and just say, well, what are you going to have outsized expectations on? And I hope we get 3 games at least out of Wagler. I have them going to the Final Four for no other reason other than they also have a Stojakovic. Well, they have a Stojakovic on their team, and I think that's cool. And I'm not really buying Florida for no reason. I don't know. I have no reason for that.
They're not better than they were last year.
No, and
although I don't know if I'm spoiling the rest of our conversation. One of the players I am looking out for,
take it away.
He was actually like my last non-second round fringe pick that I was interested in observing. Thomas Houck. He's a 6'10", 220-pound forward, and he was good last year. He's great this year. And forgive me for jumping to conclusions. This is going to sound obvious, but the more I watch his tape, I'm like, this guy is a facsimile for Lauri Markkanen. But this year, he's made a big jump in his three-point attempts. He's averaging 5.5 three-point attempts per game. He's shooting 35% from deep. He's got that wiry frame. He's 6'10", 220, but he's not just wiry. Like, he's also really athletic. I think he fits incredibly well into the context of the Utah Jazz offense. Half his highlights, when unless it's like catch and shooting for 3, he's just dunking off cuts. He's cutting perfectly. And I see him just coming into the game as a 6-man, replacing Markkanen or Triple J, and coming and playing off Collier, playing off Keontae, and just getting tons of high-efficiency baskets. His three-point shot looks great. You want him to shoot a little bit better than 35%, but at least that's at high three-point volume. And so I think he's really a guy that you plug and play. Unlike someone like Cam Boozer, he's not a heliocentric basketball player. The ball doesn't have to go through him. It doesn't have to be gigantic usage. And then obviously there's the mild comedy factor where the Jazz would end up drafting back-to-back players in consecutive drafts from the 2025 national champion Florida Gators.
And it's an interesting approach. Again, the Jazz without a second-round pick, but could always I think Kyle Filipowski has value to a lot of teams as more of a heliocentric player, as you were mentioning. Like there are so many different types of players that you're trying to find at the end of the first round and the early second round. One of them is you're just trying to draft a role player immediately, that you're just saying you have no ceiling, but we are drafting you to do stuff for 12 years in a very specific role. The Jazz tried that with Tony Bradley and Udoka Azubuike, right? Just to be like, you are bullshit, but we think that you will be a backup center for 12 years. And they fail both times. You can draft.
Well, one of them ended up being a backup center in the NBA Finals last year.
Starting
Just
center
not
for a couple
Jazz.
times, right? And unbelievable that we saw Tony Bradley in pivotal moments and failed almost
My
every time.
favorite
But we
stat
still
of
had
Game
him.
7 of the 2025 Finals, Tony Bradley making an appearance, and I believe scoring a point, scoring 2 points on free throws.
Now, I do remember Azubuike had got a 10-day with the Suns last year. I don't know where he's at this year, and this is not something that I care to look up right now.
I will guess at least 9 time zones ahead of me.
Playing in Australia, China, Japan, one of the three. Or I don't think he's in the G League right now. Anyways,
He's currently playing in an Israeli league, Aroni Nes Ziona, in
So-
Nes Ziona, Israel.
so that is 9 time zones ahead of you then. Okay.
Yeah, give or take.
Best of luck to you, Udoka. So you're drafting these.
Stay safe.
Yeah, these days. You're drafting a pure role player. You're drafting pure raw sexy potential. This is Peyton Watson, right? You're just saying we're just betting on the tools. This is worth a draft pick, or you're drafting a guy that has a lot of actual basketball tools, and you don't know if they're NBA tools. This is a Draymond Green, where you're saying you obviously can play basketball super well. The game of basketball. Does this translate to the NBA? Not athletically. Like, you athletically do not translate to the NBA. But you have played high-level basketball your whole life, so surely we got to take a chance on it. So that's Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski's in the Draymond Green category of why you're drafting him. And his first 2 years have proven that. He's done the things he did in college well in the NBA. The things he sucked at in college, he still sucks at in the NBA. And I think there is a role for him on a non-Jazz team. So if the Jazz are going to get back into the second round, I could see them saying, look, we drafted Kyle Filipowski. He makes $3 million. He's useful. But we, as a Utah Jazz organization, we need to take a different swing in the 2026 NBA draft. Give us your 43rd pick, and we'll give you Kyle Filipowski. I think there are some teams that would say, we want what he provides, and we're willing to bet on that. So that's a way I can see the Jazz getting back into the second round. Very reminiscent of trading Fontecchio, very reminiscent of trading Ochai Agbaji, that the Jazz are kind of churning these picks and trying to get their next Peyton Watson, who looks incredible. So I love how the idea of him, that sounds cool to me. I'm excited to watch him, and that's exactly the kind of player where you say he shoots 35% from three, but he shoots a lot. Just like Cam Boozer in his passing, I want to see what these. I'm more curious to see what these shots look like, right? Like, it's not that you shoot 35%, but are you being asked to do a bunch of very high-paced catch-and-shoot shit, or are you wide open and you just miss 65% of them?
I think at this point in his career, for Hauck's case, he's more of a catch-and-shoot guy. He's not a guy who's going to create off the dribble or anything like that. But I think every shot opportunity with him is going to be high quality, because it's going to be a Keontae George or an Ace Bailey creating and setting him up for a three, or the ball moving around, or Larry Markkinen passing out of a double, something like that, and finding him. And then again, the cutting and finding his way to the hoop. I think he's a magnificent cutter, and he would slot into the Jazz lineup really seamlessly from that facet.
Very curious to see how the Jazz operate the back half of this draft, if they get back in at all.
Yeah.
Because not only did I mean what I said at the top, what you also chimed in on about surplus value, needing to find players on cheap rookie deals to make this championship roster a possibility. But also, there's just like a lot of talent that will be exciting for us to watch this weekend. That I'm like, I hope the Jazz get on them. And so, is there anyone else? This is our I want to give us a last grasp here to say,
yes.
Is there a player currently sitting outside those top 8 guys that we mentioned that if they have a great tournament run, you're like, hey, if the lottery sucked, we pick 8th, but this is a guy because he crushed it for 4 games in March makes you really excited to go from perhaps 13th, 14th pick to a player that will help us win a championship in Utah?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little bit.
Sure.
It's going to be 2 players, but they're on the same team. So you don't have to use any extra energy trying to find a second TV or doing extra clicking. It's going to be Braxton Burries and Koa Pete from Arizona. So depending on which media outlet or prognosticator you're consulting, Burries could go anywhere from like 8th to mid first round. And to close out on Thomas Hope, by the way, I think the draft boards I've seen, he's going anywhere from like 11 to 20. So that's an interesting case to consider if the Jazz are interested in trying to, if someone wanted to pay a high fee for Kyle Filipowski or something else happens that allows the Jazz to buy back into the mid first round. But getting back to Burries and Pete, I've seen some different boards that have had Burries like 8th, 9th, 10th. And then Pete, I think on ESPN, they got him ranked 16th. And I think they are both really compelling players. Number one reason being they're playing on a team that I picked to win the first bracket I've drafted. I'm probably going to make multiple brackets because I just can't have the thought perish of not picking Purdue or not picking Duke to win the national championship.
I enter multiple pools on multiple things just because it's fun and I have different friend groups or whatever. You get one bracket out of me.
Yeah. Arizona's due. They're 32-2. They won the regular season championship in the Big 12. They won the Big 12 tournament. So, and one of the reasons for that is their roster's stacked. They've got Braxton Burries and Koa Pete. So with Burries, the more I watched him, and I need to watch a lot more of him, he's another guy that I think is plug and play. He's not going to be the top player in this draft, but he has the potential, I think. He's not the most elite athlete in this draft, but I see moments where he just is an explosive slasher to the basket, and he kind of surprises you with the way he finishes. I think if all goes well for him, he's got the potential to be a 3-level scorer. But if he arrives on the Utah Jazz, the pressure's not going to be on him on day one. And I think that's like the perfect guy that you have come off the bench and be your 6th man, and you kind of ease him in as the season goes along. You look at a player like VJ Edgecombe, where he exploded on day one as a starter, and it's like, okay, he's our guy. I think for Burries, you're going to have to watch him, and you're going to have to watch the Utah Jazz as the season goes on, and it's going to be eventually kind of revealed to you like a curtain slowly drawing back. So if I had to pick one guy he reminds me of, at least from a functional standpoint, I'm not saying he's going to get to that level because it may be unfair to place those expectations on him, but being like a 6'4", 6'5", I think he's, again, a combo guard, but he's someone who can play 2 guard well off of Keontae. And then if Keontae or Collier's on the bench, he's a guy who can get the ball and push it out into transition. He reminds me functionally of Jamal Murray because he plays at his own speed, but he's explosive in parts, specifically on drives. He slices and sees angles. So number one, I'm obviously interested to see how he's going to perform with Arizona as a big-time performer. Is he going to have like a big 30-point game? Is he going to have more than one of those? But I'm also curious to see how he is as a playmaker. And then it seems like a lot of his highlights, they're defensive plays. So I want to see how he stands out as an individual defender. He's also shown some bouts of being crafty in the mid-range. But again, it's like not a huge emphasis when we're looking at these players. Like I think Ace Bailey is example A, B, and C. We're not judging him based on how good or bad Rutgers was, but I certainly don't think it hurts that Arizona's like clearly the best regular season team in the country, going 32-2 with Braxton Burries. And then the more I watch Koa Pete, I think he's something between like, he's not quite a project, but he's not a finished product. He's built like LeBron. He is a meal ready to eat. So I think he's like a 6'8", 235-pound athletic tank. And again, like, I don't know if the shooting's ever going to get there. He's only like a 59% free throw shooter, but he's a 54% shooter from the floor. So again, he's an efficient scorer. He finds his spots. His 3-point stroke looks good. It just needs to come along. But he averaged 13 points a game, 5 rebounds, almost 3 assists. So again, he's like this really malleable guy. And I want to see, some people have compared to Aaron Gordon. I think he's more of a physical bull. I don't know if he's got another growth spurt in him, but I think he might be like one of the most rangiest guys who will get drafted in the top 15 of the NBA draft, because I think to me, he's obvious. He's without a doubt, he's going to be a winning player wherever he ends up. If he ends up on like the San Antonio Spurs, he'd be an absolute terror. If he ends up on the Oklahoma City Thunder, everyone's going to be further screwed because he's basically going to be like the second coming of Lou Dort, but take Lou Dort and make him like 6'8", 6'9", and keep the same amount of muscle and poundage on him. And then we're going to see how he's going to develop offensively, but he's a guy that you slot in and he's going to be physical from day one. He looks like an NBA player body-wise. I'm really excited to see how he's going to perform in the tournament. And then I think this guy's stock is just going to continue to rise as long as he just doesn't throw up clank after clank during all of the pre-draft workouts.
Yeah, I think we're still in the range of players whose it's not really until you get to like the 14 to 20 ranked guys that could really fall because of a bad tournament. These are still guys that they're going to be lottery picks who could go from 14 to 7 if they crush it. And that's what Pete and Brio seem to me is, especially for Arizona, who should have a pretty good tournament, unless my prognostication.
They're both just dogs too, when you watch them. Like they just play nasty, they play hard, which is really fascinating to me because both of them are freshmen, and from everything I've seen, they play like upperclassmen.
And it's an NBA skill. Availability and dogness is an absolute skill. Teams
and the Jazz can certainly use more of that.
Yeah. They value it even for small things like, hey, this is a long fucking season. From training camp until May, ideally June, are you somebody that raises the value of our star players by giving them practice reps, challenging opponents? It's not just like scout team bullshit. You only have 15 active players in a few two-ways. Like your active NBA players cannot just be bullshit end of roster nonsense. They have to be valuable contributors in some capacity. If you're a championship team, right? If you're looking at these championship rosters, these championship contenders for the NBA and every year, they very, very rarely have total bullshit at the end of their roster, right? Occasionally you'll have a Udonis Haslem. But very, very rarely will you see a championship contender without a player who serves a purpose for that team. If they're not getting minutes, then they're not getting minutes. But are they getting
bringing
minutes?
Something additive?
Is there a rotation spot when players get hurt? Are they a player that's beating people up in practice? Right. By the way, I think that's Oscar Tshiebwe's entire presence on the team right now is because he is the best rebounder on the team. And so he makes everyone have to work their ass off in practice, and everyone loves being around Oscar Tshiebwe. There is no NBA future for Oscar Tshiebwe, but he has raised the value in the competitiveness of the entire team this year. Same thing kind of with Elijah Harkless. Harkless can get on the floor better because he has more translatable NBA skills, but like the dude is horrible offensively. He provides these NBA skills. So when you look at a guy like Koa Pete, you could see a lot of a lot of these. The reason tanking is kind of a weird thing this year is because there are so many really good teams who are going to end up in the lottery because the season just didn't work out. Like even the Mavericks, Kyrie Irving's been on the shelf the whole year. The Mavericks are going into next year being like, we're a playoff team. So if they don't win the lottery, knock on wood, because fuck that, they should not win the lottery. But if they get a back lottery pick and they end up with Koa Pete, right, who may not be ready to take Najee Marshall's minutes next year, well, Koa Pete could still raise the competitiveness level and skill level of a lot of Cooper Flagg, like going up against him in practice, right? So I love what you mean about the dogness of some of these guys. That's very cool to me.
Again, I don't want to do hypotheticals that benefit teams that are rivals to the Jazz, but I can see Koa Pete, if he hits a ceiling, being part of the championship nucleus of Kingston Fleming's Koa Pete and Cooper Flagg with the Mavericks because they're all such dynamic two-way players. Kingston Fleming's, I don't know about his defense. That's something I'll have to investigate as Houston goes on.
Yeah, it's something as you're watching the tournament for the first time, I'm sure we got hundreds, if not thousands, of our listeners will be more familiar with the college basketball than us. I certainly am not. The random players that I'm aware of and I'm excited to see for the first time. This guy Nate Ament, am I pronouncing that right? Ament, or is it Ament? out of
I'm gonna have
Tennessee.
to look up the pronunciation on that as well. But I did look him up before our call as well, and I'm still getting to know him. But everything I've read so far has been juicy and scintillating.
So the idea of a 6'1" guard, you know that like either you're going to succeed in the NBA or you're not going to be in the NBA. But if you're 6'10", like Nate Ament, you're going to be in the NBA for a little bit, right? And it's more about what you can do around that. So interested to see what Tennessee can do around the tournament, because if they end up in a surprising little Elite Eight run, it's going to be because of him. And so we'll see a little bit of that. I have no idea what he looks like, but that's a player. If you're a Jazz fan and we end up picking 7th or 8th, he'll be on the ticket. From there, the possibilities are wide open for Utah. I'm just so thrilled about this tournament, having so many relevant players, and I don't have a natural conclusion, Justin. I will say the reason I care about the pronunciation of names is actually a story that you'll appreciate, because you are very much into you are in the sports broadcasting business to many different extents throughout your life. I don't think I've ever told you the story, and I like telling the story, and a podcast is a good place as any to do it. When I was in high school, I was a varsity soccer player, and I dislocated my kneecap a month before my junior season. And so it was one that required a surgery and had to get cleaned up, so I was going to miss my junior year of varsity soccer, and it was very dispiriting to me, but it allowed me to be the PA announcer for the sports stadium at my high school for that
boy,
year.
A career is born.
So I actually did a whole bunch of JV football, JV soccer, all sorts of stuff for our stadium and the Aquinas Institute in Rochester, New York. We have some pretty good sports up there, so actually had some good experiences as an announcer. But I would go down to the field before every game and talk to the visiting coach. And I would have a printout of their roster that they would email beforehand. And I would go down the entire roster and say, like, clarify pronunciation of players' names. And in football, those, especially in JV and freshman football, they can be 80 people long. But I'm still like,
any
hey,
responsible, prudent broadcaster would do.
I also don't have a depth chart, right? So I'm just like, I want to know all of these players. And 100% of the time, not 95, not 93% of the time, 100% of the time, it didn't matter to the sport, didn't matter how deep the roster was. I would ask a coach about at least one player's name, and the coach, who's certainly caring about other things, but this is one of the things that I think they should care about, is somebody asking, hey, how do you pronounce this player's name? And they would say, you don't have to worry about that. He or she won't play. Or they played a position where there would be no reason for me to announce their name at the stadium, right? And I'm just a dipshit 15 or 16-year-old at the time, and I just thought that was the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard in my entire life, and it has stuck with me my whole life. And so when I see a guy like Nate Ament, and I'm like, and I've struggled with Keaton Wagler today, like I care so much about pronouncing people's names correctly, because it is who you are, it's your identity. And so I don't know why I decided to go off on that now, but I was like, I care about it.
Well, I used to write pronunciation guides for a living. I don't do that anymore so much, but I can empathize with your aspiration to make sure everyone feels respected with the proper name pronunciation. But I will say, depending on certain performances this weekend, everyone's going to know those folks' names in the next 24 to 72 hours.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. Hopefully everyone's brackets go great. We've gone 90 minutes for you guys on what to look for as a Jazz fan for this weekend's hoops. But hopefully you just have some fun watching some great basketball, because there's something about November, December college basketball that doesn't exactly pique my interest. When we get to March and April NBA basketball, I kind of struggle. So I look forward to March Madness as being like, this is the high intensity moments for a lot of these guys. And this is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of their entire college careers. So that pressure does matter. We've seen it in the NBA, and I think the past 5 to 8 years is that pressure tested moments actually do. It's not bullshit. It's not just some qualitative whimsy. It actually does matter in today's NBA when the athleticism level across the NBA has never been higher, and it's pretty equal across teams in different respects. The give a shit level tends to show up a little bit more. And I think it starts in March Madness. So, Justin, any parting words on your inaugural appearance on the Salt City Hoops podcast?
Honored to be here. A pleasure to spend the last hour and a half to 2 hours with you. I wouldn't have it any other way. I can't think of a better way to tip off March Madness. And I just think about what you said about this time of the year. For me, it evokes so many great memories. I probably don't have the career that I do without the advent and the existence of March Madness. So now it's at the Division III level mainly, but dreams became true because of that. But it's hard to think of an ecosystem or a gathering area, a melting pot, so to speak, where so many dreams crescendo at the same time and also do for the very last time. So there's people you don't know exist right now. And in the next, again, 24 to 72 hours, they become indelible names of legend. And that's the most exciting part. Like, there's a reason it's called a Cinderella story. There's all these fairy tales converging on courts coast to coast over the course of the next 4 days. And that, coupled with spring, the sun coming out, the transition to daylight savings time, there is just so much magic and promise in the air that's going to translate to television, and memories will be made.
What a great sign off, Justin. This has been a pleasure. For me personally, we chat all the time. You can find Justin with me on Blue Sky. He's at Gets It on Blue Sky. There are a lot of Jazz fans over on Blue Sky, and I really don't give a shit if you're on Twitter or not, but if you want to come hang out with us, that's where we are.
The water's warm.
A lot of NBA, a lot of college stuff. Like, it's a sports website now. It's not dead. We're having a great time over there, and I've greatly enjoyed chatting with you all the time. Many of us over there. There are many. We are legion, but also. Well, if you're listening to the show and you're commenting on YouTube, Spotify, I love responding to your comments. I love saying hello. I love if you got takes on any of these players. I want to hear them. I'm going to like them. I'm going to respond to them. Salt City Hoops is on Twitter. We'll respond to you there as well. So wherever you're at, we do this because I like talking to people. I like talking to people about the Jazz, about our ideas. This is not for clicks. This is not for advertisements. This is just to hang out with you guys as Jazz fans and basketball fans. So whatever thoughts you have, I want to hear them. So my name is Mark for Salt City Hoops. That is Justin Sweeney. I hope to hear from you again soon. Enjoy the tournament this weekend, and TBD if I'll see you next week. I'm on vacation, but I care about putting Jazz stuff out for you guys. So I'll probably see you guys next week. All right. Good night, everybody.